Welcome, everyone, to the podcast Legal Leaders Insights, the podcast where innovation meets experience in the world of law. I'm Giulio Coraggio, the location head of the Italian Intellectual Property and Technology Department at the global law firm DLA Piper. I'm glad to have here as a special guest Ronan Davy. Ronan is Associate General Counsel at Anthropic. Anthropic is one of the largest LLMs in the world, and therefore we will talk about artificial intelligence a lot during this chat. Welcome, Ronan, and thank you for accepting my invitation.
Thanks for having me, Giulio. Excited to be here today.
Ronan, we were chatting before, and you said, can I talk about the history of Anthropic? And I said, of course. And also because the founders of Anthropic are Italian, and I'm really proud of that. But can you give us a bit of background on Anthropic and its history and why Anthropic differentiates itself from some of the other kids on the block in the AI world?
Thanks, Giulio. I'd love to. So just a quick overview of our background on our EU entry. Anthropic, we're an AI safety and research company, and our mission is to ensure a safe and secure transition to advanced artificial intelligence, and to do so in a way that benefits humanity. And in order to fulfill this mission and enable us to conduct our research, what we do is we build foundational AI models and systems. We're a very new company. We're actually only 4 years old. We're founded in San Francisco, where we're still headquartered. And as you mentioned before, some of our co-founders are Italian. Yep. Our primary product is a chatbot called Claude. And while different versions of it are available to consumers, businesses, and developers, the majority of our business to date has focused on the developer and enterprise side of the market than the consumer side. And we've had this chatbot called Claude, but we actually only released it to the public for the first time in early 2023, when we released it in the US. And we only released it to consumers in the EU last May. And we wanted to be intentional about pacing the release of Claude to the EU market, because we wanted to make sure it took account of EU-specific considerations.
Absolutely. In order to avoid the mistakes of the others.
So exactly, and so while we're very new to the EU market, we're excited about the opportunities that we think Claude can help to unlock for the EU, and we're also particularly mindful of trying to do so in a way that upholds European values and fundamental rights.
No, it's super interesting. But Ronan, let's do a step back. Can you give us a snippet of your career and how you got to this relevant role? You are now Associate General Counsel at Anthropic in Europe, and Anthropic is expanding massively in Europe. You told me that you have over 100 hires across Europe in the coming months, which is quite impressive. So can you give us a bit of background around yourself?
Thanks, Giulio. Just by way of my own professional background, I think I've over 20 years of experience in the legal and compliance game. I spent the first half of that time working in private practice in two of the larger law firms here in Ireland. And then I'd say the second half of my career has been in industry, in the technology industry. And I'd say my time spent in my previous employer, Etsy, was probably the most formative in helping to shape my interest in working at the frontier of tech development, and the catalyst in piquing my interest around EU law, around AI law. So for anyone not familiar with Etsy, Etsy's a US headquartered e-commerce marketplace. And when I started there 9 years ago, one of the things that attracted me to Etsy was that its business model, being a platform, was the big tech development at the time. You had the birth of social media platforms. You also had the rise of e-commerce platforms, and Etsy became one of the bigger players. And when I started back in 2015, platforms were largely unregulated. When you look back now, there was little or no privacy or product liability or content moderation or oversight of hate speech. And then the regulation slowly came. And all of these areas subsequently became regulated for platforms. And the EU was the primary place in which a lot of this regulation started. And when I was at Etsy, we essentially went from an unregulated space to an extensively regulated space over the course of my 9 years there. And that led to the area of platform law becoming a novel area of tech law. And it was around about 3 years ago, around the time that ChatGPT was introduced to the world, that I started to see that AI was set to become the next big tech development. And AI law was similarly going to become a huge area of tech law. And I loved the idea of navigating and shaping uncharted legal territory in a new space all over again and doing new work in a novel area of tech law. So I started to upskill in this area and look for opportunities within the AI industry. And some of this upskilling involved thinking about the application of existing tech frameworks and law to a new technology like Gen AI. So, for example, some of the pre-existing privacy laws, copyright laws, content moderation, cybersecurity. And some of it, more recently, has involved considering the application of more recent AI-specific regulation to our business. And I was really fortunate that not long after I decided to upskill in those areas and really take an interest in AI law, that Anthropic decided to open its first EU office in Dublin, and this opportunity presented itself for me.
Absolutely. I mean, my background in terms of approach to the legal profession is quite similar to yours. It's the goal is to explore uncharted territories in order to apply traditional legal principles to new concepts, finding solutions that enable the business to do what they want, obviously reducing the legal risks. And this goes to my second question to you, Ronan. The approach to the business of Anthropic is quite different from your competitors in the sense that Anthropic places safety and ethical AI at the core of their values and their approach to business. In a situation where we have the AI Act, the first provisions are already in place, and you were mentioning before, in Europe we are over-regulating innovation. So how do you find the right balance between compliance and business needs in a situation where you have the largest tech companies as your investors? So obviously they want you to generate business. You have developers. I mean, obviously your targets are probably very demanding.
Yeah, so they're all the questions that are top of mind for us and that we're giving a lot of thought to at Anthropic these days. I guess just stepping back, one of the things that I'm proud to say at Anthropic is that so much of our commitment to AI safety and the standards that we voluntarily set for ourselves at Anthropic, they've served as a really strong foundation or keystone when it comes to compliance readiness around AI-specific safety regulation like the AI Act. And maybe to give an example of that, or and provide some context, for Anthropic, safety really is in our DNA. Anybody familiar with our backstory will understand our entire founding was predicated on the basis of being a safety-first company operating in the frontier. And one of the things that really attracted me Anthropic was the strength of its mission. And since I've joined, I've been really pleasantly surprised by the strength of the mission and how much it shows up on a daily basis in our work. And maybe just to give one example of this work and how we see it playing out when it comes to regulation like the EU AI Act. we developed the concept, or pioneered the concept, of what's called a responsible scaling policy across the Gen AI industry. And for anyone not familiar with a responsible scaling policy, it's a framework for guiding our approach to the development of AI models in a safe and secure manner. And the way the policy works is that as AI models become more capable, we commit to not deploying them unless commensurate safety and security mitigations are in place to mitigate those risks. And we're really proud to say we were the first company in the frontier to create one and publicly disclose it, and then all of the other key frontier players followed. And now the AI Act actually looks set to include this concept of a responsible scaling policy. It's included in the drafts of the code. It's currently included in the drafts of the codes of practice relating to gen purpose AI models. It's called a safety and security framework. So all of that is to say is when it comes to compliance readiness, very often our pre-existing safety standards typically provide a strong foundation to our compliance readiness efforts for laws like the AI Act. And from there, it's really a case of regulatory readiness 101. We analyze a law, we see if there are gaps between our current safety practices and the new legal requirements, and then we work on closing out those gaps as part of our compliance efforts.
Absolutely. So this leads me to another question. Do you see regulations on artificial intelligence as a problem, or as an advantage because it creates a higher level of trust in your customers relating to AI solutions that, from at least I would say part of the public, are seen a kind of borderline because of the way they gather information, the process data, and so on. So what is your view on where Europe is heading? We all heard that there is a proposal of reducing the impact of the AI Act and kind of limiting the scope of some of its provisions that even have not even come into force.
Yeah, and it's so hard to keep up with so much policy and regulatory developments right now. Working on the inside of the industry, I find it very hard to keep up on a weekly basis. But look, to go back to your original question, I'm not sure I can offer a prediction around enforcement under the AI Act. I think that's going to be crystal ball stuff at the best of times, but also in the current environment, it feels really, really challenging to know how the regulatory landscape in the EU is going to play out. There's so much going on at the regional policy and geopolitical level. It truly seems like anybody's best guess. But just conceptually, I don't think stricter AI regulation necessarily has to mean a stifling of innovation. I don't think it needs to be an either-or scenario. I think it's actually very possible for regulation and innovation to sit alongside each other and to be mutually reinforcing, provided that the given regulatory framework is flexible and proportionate. And maybe if I could just maybe expand a little bit on what I mean by flexible. I mentioned flexibility. I think there's a need for AI regulation to provide flexibility in an industry where both the technology and the safety standards are rapidly evolving. And I think flexibility needs to be an overriding principle for AI regulation to be effective because of that. And look, the tech and the safety standards, they're moving so fast. And rigid prescriptive requirements don't really lend themselves to working well in such a nascent industry and environment. And our experience operating at the frontier and pioneering so much of the safety standards at the frontier has been that we've occasionally had to evolve our voluntary safety standards due to the pace at which our safety standards have had to evolve. And it should be an iterative process that's based upon continuous improvement.
Yeah. Last question, Ronan. if you need to give a piece of advice to whoever wants to start a legal profession in AI law, what do you think it should be the essential skill that this person needs to develop?
I'll give you two skills, but the first one is to use Claude, if you'll forgive the plug. But
safely.
on a serious note, I think the first skill is this whole concept of AI literacy and being able to lean in and use and engage the technology. I think as lawyers, the easy part of our job is actually upskilling in the law. I think the more challenging part is understanding the technology. And I think in order to do that, you need to use it. You need to understand how the product works. Otherwise, it's very, very hard to really give legal advice. And once you have this concept of AI literacy developed, that you actually understand the technology, you're able to use it. I think the second most critical skill is this whole concept of systems thinking. And by that, I mean the ability to understand how AI technology, legal frameworks, and then business models interconnect across multiple domains. And as leaders in AI law, I think we need to grasp those technical concepts well enough to engage meaningfully with our leadership team. They're essentially translating between worlds: the tech world, the business world, the policy world, society. And while other skills like tech literacy and negotiation and regulatory expertise and knowledge of AI law, they're important, this whole concept of systems thinking is really what allows you to synthesize all of these concepts and ideas effectively and to see bigger pictures that others might miss out.
Yeah, that is really fascinating, because I think especially in a fast growing business like the AI business, you need legal counsels need to be part of the business, need to understand the legal concepts, but not only the business concept and the technical concepts, because otherwise they will be seen outside as a kind of a silo outside the business, that they're going to be ignored, isolated, and that will make even more complicated for legal counsels to drive the message that legal compliance is an additional value for the business. So thank you, Ronan. And thank you for your fantastic insights. I think they are very valuable for our audience. And I hope to have another chat in the coming years, where we will see how the AI world has been evolving.
Thank you. It was great chat, and I really appreciate your time as always and your expertise in this field.
Thank you, everyone. Arrivederci.